If China ever loses control of the South China Sea, its economy could be crippled in weeks without a single missile being fired. That's why this is not a fight over rocks or reef. It's a struggle over global trade, military access, and who sets the rule of the international system. In Western media, the South China Sea is often framed as a distant Asian dispute, something regional, something abstract. That framing is dangerously wrong. Roughly one third of global maritime trade passes through this stretch of water. Energy supplies bound for East Asia, consumer goods headed to Europe and North America disrupt the sea, and the shock waves are felt far beyond Asia. Here is the strategic reality China is trying to escape. Nearly 80% of China's oil imports move through a single choke point, the Strait of Malacca. It's narrow, crowded, and heavily monitored by US aligned naval powers. In a major conflict, the United States wouldn't need to strike Chinese cities. It could simply shut this gate. This vulnerability is known as the Malacca Dilemma, and Beijing's response was not diplomatic reassurance, it was physical control. Over the last decade, China dredged thousands of acres of seabed to construct fortified bases across the South China Sea. Long runways capable of hosting bombers, radar systems extending hundreds of miles, missile shelters hardened against attack. These are often called artificial islands. That description misses the point. They function as forward military platforms, unsinkable aircraft carriers designed to push US and allied forces farther from China's coast. From these positions, China can monitor naval traffic, challenge freedom of navigation operations, and raise the cost of any attempted blockade. The objective is straightforward: prevent the US Navy from controlling China's economic lifeline. As we move through 2025, the contest has entered a new phase. A direct US-China war remains unlikely. Instead, the confrontation plays out in what strategists call the gray zone, coercion without open conflict. Near features like Sabina Shoal, Chinese Coast Guard vessels routinely use water cannons, close quarters maneuvering, and intimidation against Philippine ships. One vessel alone, a 12,000-ton Coast Guard ship, outweighs most frontline ships operated by Southeast Asian navies. No shots fired, no declaration of war, but facts are created at sea. For years, Washington responded with statements and patrols. That approach is changing. In late 2024, the US deployed the Typhoon missile system to northern Luzon in the Philippines. From land-based launchers, US forces can now strike Chinese military facilities in the Spratly and Paracel Islands using long-range cruise missiles. For the first time, China's island bases are exposed to sustained pressure from mobile land-based firepower. This signals a shift. The South China Sea is no longer a space China can dominate without challenge. But trade routes and missiles are only part of the story. The deeper reason Beijing refuses to loosen its grip lies beneath the surface. The South China Sea contains deep water zones exceeding 5,000 meters. For China's Navy, this depth offers something priceless, a protected bastion where nuclear-armed submarines can patrol with a reduced risk of detection. The island bases above serve as shields, extending air cover, surveillance, and anti-submarine defenses over these underwater sanctuaries. If China loses control of the South China Sea, it doesn't just lose leverage over trade, it undermines the credibility of its nuclear deterrent. And for any major power, this is an unacceptable outcome. Regional states are left balancing between economics and security. Southeast Asian governments depend on trade with China, yet rely on US power to preserve access and autonomy. Hedging becomes the only viable strategy. This is why the South China Sea will not be settled by a treaty, and why a sudden all-out war remains unlikely for now. Instead, the region is locked into a permanent state of competition, a slow-burning confrontation where each move tests resolve and every retreat reshapes the balance of power. For the US and its allies, this is not a distant dispute. It's the front line of a new era of great power rivalry. And it was never about the rocks.